pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Review, approve meeting minutes. Thank you for putting those together. I've got no concerns or issues with them.
The only thing I spelled is
Stantec.
wrong, which I will fix.
Okay.
But that was it. It doesn't have anything after the end of it. So,
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's a minor correction. No problem, it's just doing that. So motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's approved. All right, status of the draft airport master plan. As we've talked about before, the airport master plan is right now kind of in a holding pattern while they get their management structure sorted out. With Jeremy leaving and the new airport manager coming in, even though he was the old airport manager, I've been deliberately kind of holding back on going over and irritating him to give him a little bit of a chance to get back up to speed before I start talking to him. So probably before the next meeting, I expect I'll go over and try to have some conversations with him.
Was
Jeff
Murphy?
Yeah.
Was he invited to the public meeting?
He was. I invited him. I sent an email. He said he would like to be there, but he had other commitments. And so, we set that meeting up before we knew that Jeremy was resigning, but I did invite him. But like I said, I felt like of all the things he needed to get a hold of, trying to deal with us was probably not high on his priority list. But I will get in touch with him in the future. Same sort of thing with APAC. Jeremy had been very good about including me on all APAC correspondence. I suspect there hasn't been any, or I've been dropped off the email chain, but that's something else I'll pick up and make sure we're doing. So I'm going through the reports here.
Sure.
Jeremy's was going to provide interaction with other organizations. So I guess we pumped on that one.
Do we know what the organizations were that he was contacting?
And no, off the top of my head.
I think it was namely the FAA. Really.
Well, yeah, we were also trying to make sure that we reached out and coordinated with other people. You're right, it probably is just the FAA.
I brought up the MAA, so lots of things happening, the main level.
Right.
And I think I'm just gonna do this direct for people that are gonna donate some bikes and side countries. So this is a bike store pilot.
Right.
And we have the perfect location because it's like bikeable.
Right.
So 5 miles, all sorts of cool things.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna donate a bike, another pilot's donating a bike. Side country's gonna donate a couple racks.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm just trying to connect with Carson because there are a couple. So there's 24-hour access through the pilot lounge there.
Okay.
Pilot lounge.
That's probably somebody.
Get it.
See, that's why I'm here late.
You get locked out. So there's a pilot lounge?
I don't think there's much.
Where is it?
I think it's the leader. I think it's in the new building.
That's the thing.
Sorry, guys.
It's okay.
I was at Home Depot, not Home Depot, Lowe's at like 4 o'clock, and I sat down with the cabinet lady. I said, to order one cabinet. She already had my order, all the information, and it turned into a debacle. So anyway,
Okay.
Here I am.
Yes.
Right there?
So we were figuring out what we were on interaction with other organizations. Was there another one besides the FAA that you were dealing with?
There was always all kinds of them, but The only other organizations really that I've talked to since I've left has been consulting firms that were looking to become the county's engineering consultant. And I think the APAC met on Monday night, and I don't know what the outcome of that is yet, so.
Okay. So that, if the APAC met Monday, that does mean I've dropped off the email list. You used to keep me on.
Everybody dropped off. They didn't even notify consultants that they were being,
Okay.
everybody's not very happy. Yeah,
Did anyone show up?
Stantec.
Oh, can we get the spelling of Stantec?
Yeah, and quorum.
Yeah, he's the one who told me about this.
You got the right spelling?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jeremy
okay.
told me.
So the consultant was chosen?
Most likely the consultant was recommended to the commission.
That's the answer.
Commission makes the final decision. But they had already been preempted that Stantec should remain the consultant by
For a
the
year.
interim administrator
That's-
and the interim manager. So kind of circumventing the whole process.
I'm sorry. Are you saying they're doing it for just a year, or are they saying
I
they're,
don't know.
you don't know? Got it.
Didn't attend.
I know the consultants that we used to use in my work, it was not at all uncommon to exclude for a year or so, every once in a while.
I figured out, I gotta keep that on.
Hey, it's getting hard, man.
Oh, that's a good point.
I can just leave it at jar.
Okay.
Did I ask you guys not to set the alarm?
We never set the alarm.
We never said it.
We
Oh, you
just-
never do
we just
anyways.
close the door.
Mistakes, we leave it on.
Perfect, sounds good. We're downstairs, so I'll set it when I leave.
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
All right.
Thanks
Thank you.
again. Thanks.
I don't think I know how to set the alarm.
Mhm.
Anyhow, I was just saying that in my business, it was not at all uncommon to get to the end of one consulting contract. All right, we're not quite ready for the next one for whatever reason. It
Sure.
depends on what it is. It's not an uncommon thing to happen. Get back to the bikes.
The bikes. Yeah, so I'm donating one, another pilot's donating a bike for the MMA Bikes for Pilots program.
Awesome.
And then Side Country Sports is gonna donate a couple rats.
Oh, very cool.
So I was just trying to connect with Carson. I know that he's not on OHAC, but he's still
Right.
president of the flag club.
Unless he's resigned, I think. Yeah, he is.
The last couple emails have been responded to, and I made sure that he knew it was about OHAC.
Mhm.
But, so, because I thought it would work out well, because you could keep them sheltered in the hangar.
Oh, that would be great, because that's the one problem with having the bikes over there is that they fall apart in the rain
Right.
over time.
And since I'm gonna be responsible essentially for maintaining them, I'd rather not do that.
Mm.
Anyway, MAA will actually put some money towards
Oh, great.
any expenses. Anyway, yeah,
Very
that
cool.
was my organization.
Okay. Moving on to unfinished business, discussion on airport master plan information meeting. Honestly, I have very little idea of where we are now. I know you walked away from the meeting with the list of who was there.
I did, I have it, and I didn't put this for everyone because I want to streamline it more.
Okay,
So I just did like a transcript. There were, aside from our OHAC members present, there are 21 members of the public present. And so I'm sorry I didn't have this again for today. Just
That's okay. That's-
took
I
me
mean,
a bit, but I do have, it's,
I'm glad you're working on it. It's like,
the next part is easy, I just have to,
so this is a draft of what we will ultimately post on the,
yes, yes.
and when you get it, and I'm leading the witness clearly, but when you get it to the point where you're comfortable, you'll send it out to us for review and.
Yeah, and I brought it just because I think we have a letter from the attorney.
Right.
There were only a couple public questions.
Right,
The one that was addressed by the attorney, there was another one from, my point is that what the questions that were asked, I think were well responded.
right. The one from
Researching.
the one that we needed to go to the attorney was really the only one that needed separate research, but we still need to sort of wrap it up in a bow and put it out there for people.
Something I would totally welcome your input on was about the noise study. So supposedly in 2012, we didn't have software that was reliable enough to generate results that were usable for anything. That was, so Mr. Deck from Stantec responded that, to his recollection, software wasn't suitable or accurate.
Well, right, the impression I had from that, and maybe it was wrong, was that he was talking, the study isn't an actual, that he was talking about, didn't sound like an actual measurement study.
Correct.
But he was saying that the software really.
Hypothesizes or something.
Well, it's a prediction.
Right.
A prediction technique, a modeling technique. And the modeling technique hadn't really developed to the point where it was overly valid. That's what I thought he said. Is that what he said?
That's what I felt he said as
Okay.
well.
For the most part, that it's like data, so what they would use for this upcoming one is that they input data in, data out, about that. But it wasn't really, that there were no microphones, it's not actually any recordings happening, it's more, but I'm wondering, like, what is the data, I'm expecting to know this, what is the data that
Would be
would
needed.
generate, that information?
Right.
I don't know how that would work.
It might be aircraft type, possibly. That's the only thing that I can think of that would be relevant to.
So when you're talking about like noise contours, if you look at, the flight plan, when, the aircraft is descending, where that's falling, which part of the town, then, beyond that, how that would work. And also, a comment that he made, and bringing this up, like, is this something that we should look into further, how to explain it? So he said, it's something that the FAA and the county would want to include. So it seemed more that they just didn't want to include it versus the technology didn't support it.
Oh, well, I'm not sure I think that way. I mean, if the technology, if the state of simulation was at a point where it wasn't overly valid, then why spend the money to do it? But if it's more valid now, then it would make sense to spend money. That's, again, but you're absolutely right. We're all hypothesizing on what he actually meant.
Right. But I think it'd be a good community push for the county to include that in the master plan,
Right.
in that 10-year period, or to do a noise study. We've gone through a period of growth, now's the time to document that growth through a noise study or analysis.
If you're willing to write up those questions, I will then send them as official OHAC questions to the airport manager and see what we can get out of that. So we can try to resolve that issue. Other than putting this stuff on the website when we get it all done, I think that we're basically in wait mode until the airport master plan starts being developed more fully.
You mean, well, have we set a date for the next public?
No, we haven't. Originally, we were talking about every 3 months, but originally at least I thought they were drafting in 2024.
So we don't want to have another meeting until we have something for them to look at?
That would be my thought.
Yeah.
But I'm putting that out as a question more than I'm thinking maybe, or if not, something more to look at closer to when it's actually going to be drafted. So maybe another similar meeting when they're about to start drafting, even if they haven't started anything yet. But I think that's now January, but we need to keep track of what's happening.
Time goes quick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is this committee on the town website? You know?
Yes,
And all our names and
yes.
our email?
I don't know if our emails are.
So I would
I
ask,
think my email.
I would ask
Sure.
people on the website, if you have any questions, to email us.
Okay,
I don't think we need to have another meeting where people come expecting to hear
right,
answers or, the draft of a plan.
right.
Well, and the value in having
Honestly, that's
conversations
where I
prior,
was leaning to.
Great, that's great.
the value of having conversations prior to the draft is you don't want to wait till the draft is there. Because once the draft is there, they're just gonna push it through. So there's some value in having a little bit of community discussion prior to that.
Well, if you get
There's a little bit of exactly what we're using these words to mean. So if it's the draft, the final draft that's going through for approval, we clearly need to be involved before that. At some point, they've got to start putting it together. There's a first draft, there's a second draft. I assume every document I've ever worked on is like that. So I think there's a benefit in getting to the point where we're thinking this, we're thinking that, this is the direction we're going. But between the I've got nothing and here's ready to be signed, there's a lot of activity in there.
Question? One question that was raised that evening was about the subcommittee that works on the working group. As if those people are selected from the APAC membership?
Some of them, yeah. Some of them are APAC, some are business partners, some are community members. It's a very diverse group, but I think it's all selected by the commission.
So that's something, okay, got it. The commissioners appoint that.
I believe, yeah. So yeah, so if you want to be on that committee, prior to the plan being drafted,
It would be a good thing.
a good thing to, make your voice heard. Make the town's voice heard.
I don't want to be on it, but it's probably would be a good thing for me to do that when it comes up. Or at least one of us. Okay, I
So there may be value too, like one from the OHAC, one from the conservation, like one that has, people that have input into what happens here. Not just maybe a planning board member, just a variety of outlets that people should, there's no reason that they should be excluded from having a bigger voice in that.
Do you happen to know do they do a public announcement that we're doing this, apply?
It would be on the agenda. I don't know. I doubt it. I doubt it's gonna be like, hey, we have a list.
And all of that, that's why I was trying so hard to make sure I go to the APAC meetings and all that, because trying to figure out what the county is doing has not been easy. There haven't been agendas put out, there haven't been agendas for the the county commissioners haven't been putting agendas out.
It's in disarray.
It's right. It's very much in disarray. I think everyone recognizes it's in disarray, and there's people out there who I think are trying to solve it. So hopefully, as it gets more arrayed, you'll figure out what's going on. But that's exactly why I was trying to go. Is it's like never have any idea what's going to be there. That discussion on 747 landing, that was news. That was a joke. That was a joke. Okay. Linked with half a dozen different things is the memorandum from Ben McCall. So I think that very clearly answers the question that we had raised in the meeting, but it also tells us that we really don't have any chance of passing an ordinance that's going to stand any legal tests. Yes.
Well, I'll tell you, after I read it, it occurred to me that the pared down version of what we had decided on, like just having a zone called the airport was about all we could do.
Oh, without any other,
That we have this land use called airport,
right.
and then see where we go from there.
Trying so hard. Okay.
What?
No, so the letter from Ben McCall, dated April of 23 to the select board. Select board forwarded him the ordinance amendment that was presented to the town,
Okay.
hoping that he'd say, "What, are you nuts?" And he didn't.
Can I see the letter?
Sure. So there's the amendment, and this fast forward.
Yeah, I've never seen this in writing before.
So everyone knows how restrictive that
It was
language was.
extremely restrictive.
is that in the amendment, there's like a legal valve, as he put it. So anything that was required by law, they can't do that if that's what you have to do by law.
Okay. So,
So it depends on the day, I guess.
no,
Who's asking the
Can I
question?
see it?
Sure. Oh, thanks.
I think there's a fine, I mean, none of us are lawyers. And I think there's a fine legal distinction he's making. I think he's saying there, it would not be illegal to have this ordinance. It would, however, not stand up in a court of law, is what this one says. I mean, one of these, one of the things he references, I actually followed and read the case law that he identified, because it was specifically about runway length. And I went to the case law, and it was some town had passed an ordinance limiting the runway length, and it was found that they weren't allowed to do that. I mean, it was almost exactly what we've been doing.
But we, in the ordinance amendments, that wasn't included because I knew that we collectively knew that that wasn't something that we could do. The things that we included were the things that we verifiably with 3 different attorneys could by law do, and things that we couldn't enforce is why we have that disclosure that
Okay.
and you have the writing there, but anything, federally required or legally required by federal law is something they could apply. So I'm not
I don't
saying resubmit that, I feel like there's definitely some work to do with that, but, I mean, the basis is there, it doesn't have to be as extreme as that one went. But it certainly can go beyond giving the,
I can't read this and come to the conclusion that anything we do as an ordinance is going to pass the Eagle test at some level. I mean, I'd like it to. I'd like the runway thing to work, but it just, first of all what we do is make a recommendation to the select board, and the select board gets to make a recommendation or bring it to the town if they think it's a good idea. I think they're gonna look at that and say, no.
Well, and even if they say yes, and they send it to the lawyer will say no.
well, they did, and they sent it to the attorney, which is why they wanted to make sure they were presenting the people with something that was legally defendable and upholdable before they had the town vote on it, so this is the same attorney.
Oh,
So
it is? Oh, it's the same guy?
They were relying on
Oh, I see.
his legal prudence,
I-
saying, yeah, no, don't do this, and go ahead, and yes, you can.
Well, I certainly recognize that there's a disparity between the two things. I suspect that there's some fine legal point where, it's all the, what is the meaning of the is, or something like that. But I don't know, but I think this was fairly absolute.
So just because, okay, he sent us this letter, that doesn't mean it's applying to, us trying to restrict runway. So it's a very exact, very specific thing. It doesn't
No, it's
mean-
not a very exact specific thing. It's a general statement. And that was one example within it. I mean, it wasn't about the
No, I
runway.
mean, the ordinance amendment that you were suggesting, that's a very specific restriction on there, is runway length. You're doing 2 things, adding it to the land use chart, and am I remembering this right? And then restricting the runway length. In their draft.
That's what the ordinance, yes, but we didn't ask him to review the ordinance itself. We didn't ask him to review our draft.
I understand.
We asked him to, what's the general relationship between town ordinances, county, state, federal? And my understanding of what he wrote, again, it's a lawyer, and there's always nuances in there. is that he's saying, yeah, that basically we can't write an ordinance that will restrict the airport in any way, or in any way that violates an FAA regulation.
That's correct. A lot of the FAA, a lot of things within there are required, or guidance, or suggestions, or things that are federally a law or a regulation. That's a different thing, which is why, again, we've got that release in there.
Right, and I've often been adamant about the difference between contractual obligations associated with getting the funding from the FAA is very different from safety regulations associated with the FAA. Those are two very different things. But I don't know.
Here's an example. I'll try something else. When we were under the interlocal agreement,
Right.
despite that, all these infrastructural development projects and all the things, those happen anyway. But something that we kept hearing consistently, primarily from commissioners and other people, was that the interlocal agreement, that they shouldn't have been in the first place, and it was just, I'm not getting the verbiage right, but they were was restricting them from doing all the things that they wanted to do. It was against FAA regulations and all of these things. Had that been the case, they could have removed themselves from the agreement. The point is that there was nothing federally required by law that the interlocal agreement restricted them from doing. It doesn't line up. So by having an ordinance that is, you gotta word it right, but we absolutely can up our protections on certain things. I mean, I
Well,
don't-
What are we protecting?
What are we protecting
I think that's gonna be the key,
as far as?
is finding something that needs, is the driveway at the
Right.
end on the other side of Dublin Road from the runway, is that a historical site? There are things.
any of the things that, it talks about noise is an FAA issue, not a local issue. So, I've been focused very much on what is the negative impact that the airport has on the community? And for the most part, it's noise, and more noise generated by more flights. And so, as near as I can tell, anything that would deal with noise, anything that would deal with more flights, all of that stuff seems limited. If you want to, try to figure out a way to square the circle and come up with an ordinance that you think will work in accordance with this, and propose it as recommended through the OHAC to the board, we'll do that. But I'm looking at this and thinking the ordinance I wrote isn't going to work. So I'm not going to bring it up for a motion.
But I agree that we do need to put it in its own land use out of commercial.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm not
right, we need to have
I don't know that that accomplishes anything.
No, but at least it's listed. That's the only accomplishment.
Is getting it listed as a separate
Yeah.
construct.
When we went through this, the first round, Colin Clark for the DEP was being, you were asking his opinion on different things, specifically with changing the map and matching the ordinance to the map, and all of those things. He said, your ordinance can absolutely be more restrictive than, whether it's Maine state law or something else, it can never be less restrictive, but how people were going about doing it was like trying to call it a resource protected area where it wasn't the right definition for whatever's out there. It didn't line up. So instead of doing it that way, create a separate category, like you were saying. The airport is, okay, so you have an airport, it's its own thing, not trying to make it fit into something it doesn't belong.
Right, I think where we might stumble across a problem there is that it looks like we're targeting, it could look like we're targeting the airport. Like, putting a line around the general store and saying, this is the retail area, and having different regulations for the retail area. So, I don't know. Again, I think that the proposal I had, this tells me that it's going to fail.
What's gonna fail?
That the ordinance that I wrote to limit
Oh, that'll fail,
that'll fail.
yes.
So,
Yeah.
so we don't have anything on the table right now that we think will succeed. The nature of the committee, I have no idea off the top of my head what would be useful and work.
Right.
If you wanted to go draft something up and bring it to the table and we debate it, that's great.
Is this yours?
That's fine.
So,
What
What if the town of Alice had limited, the town of Alice had now owns another cemetery and then the city of a commercial property? What if you limited encroachment on a private burial ground that would limit any commercial entity, not speaking about an airport? What if, the town of Alice now has a cemetery at the end of essentially the runway? What if there's a buffer zone that you could not encroach? Because in the last town meeting, that land was changed back to rural residential 2, I believe, below Dublin or south of Dublin Road. So there's a piece of property there. But there could be an ordinance change that you cannot create a commercial zone, a commercial property within 500 feet of a cemetery or something like that. Making sure you aren't creating issues elsewhere. But, that's a new change that's come up. So it has public interest. People are buried there, people,
The noise is bothering them.
It's historical. So the only thing I was gonna say, that's a good idea, is to, in the ordinance, absolutely describe what's already there, not say,
That is a description of what's there.
well, you wrote shall contain no more than 2 runways, just that it has 2 runways. So
Okay,
the wording would be more, this is what it is right now,
okay.
and put that in what the ordinance of an airport zone is. So you can look at the ordinance and then look at the airport and see that it matches. And in that way, it'll hold it in place as well.
And as far as like a runway expansion, like if there's no room to expand on this side, then where do they have to go, right? They gotta go the other side. Let that community deal with it. We're out of room over here. There's nothing we can do about it.
It took me a while to formulate. Before the county gave us or sold us back the cemetery, wasn't that eminent domain to begin with, back in before? Is it freaking,
I remember stories about houses being bulldozed.
is it the eminent domain at the end of the cemetery, whether we have that in the ordinance or not? I'm not trying to shoot down a,
Yeah, no,
just thinking through.
the town owns it now.
But they owned it before.
The town didn't own it before. It was a private property,
Where?
cemetery.
Well, meaning it was, okay, that was on our tax.
It was on a tax map, yes. But I don't, yeah.
Yeah.
So the key is not, the key is really defining the ordinances, as we all talked about, protecting a resource or whatever, whether it's encroachment on a cemetery or it's historical property or whatever. When you hit a wall on this side, there's only one way to go, and it's the other side. And at that point, it really gets boxed in. And, I had been trying to do that with the walking trail, like really develop this beautiful walking trail that has huge public interest. And who's gonna go blowing through that? The entire community is gonna be in uproar. There were issues preventing that, but, at some point, there's a way to do this. There is. I'll tell you, there's a way to do this. And it's finding the right way and but
Can I ask a stupid, somewhat tangent question?
the key is focusing on the things that we want to protect on this side of the.
separate from federal money coming in for construction, does the airport make a profit?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's some, yes, I don't wanna get, it's all.
I'm not gonna ask you the details. just-
Yeah, but there are other departments that encroach on the airport's revenues, and there's no contractual agreements for any of that. And so if those relationships or those interactions were contractual,
So within the accounting in the county,
yes, the revenue the airport brings in
money
exceeds what it
brings in. The way you do accounting can often do really strange things.
but there's a lot against the PR. That's all it is.
So it's beyond a break-even airport.
Yeah.
To retroactively address your question earlier, is like, what are we protecting? So again, hindsight's 2020. So 15 years ago, there was more to protect because we wouldn't have to be going backwards. Now there's like, flight numbers are different. I mean, so if we have, so right now we have Cape Air, say another FBO, hypothetical, I don't see this, I don't know if it's happening. But if there's another carrier that wants to have scheduled flights. So we think like, oh, well, we just have Cape Air, that's all we're gonna have. There's nothing restricting that from happening. There could be 3 others, say, again, hypothetical, I don't legally or how that works with the FAA or what. But until you have language in there, having some foresight that these things could be possible down the road. So 15 years ago, if you had said, oh, there's gonna be 15 or 20 or whatever extra hangars, we're like, no, we don't want that. Okay, well then have language somehow in your ordinance that will address those concerns that could happen.
But this is always where I have somewhat of a different view on this. The airport having hangars or not having hangars doesn't really impact the town. I mean, whether I have an extra garage on my house or 2 garages,
Well, I was
doesn't
just
impact
thinking
the town.
the same thing. So does that, having extra hangars, does that mean there's more air travel?
Firstly, I'm not trying to pick on hangars, I'm just using
No,
that as
no,
an example. Like,
I'm
so
just
say
trying to
that
understand.
But it's an example that gets to the, why should we care that there's a hangar? I don't care that there's more hangars or not.
Okay, well, here's another hypothetical. So say one of the hangars is you're able to operate a flight school out of that. So then say you've got, they're really good instructors, so people want to come up here and learn here. So now you've got a bunch of people, right, they're taking off, we're going to take off some landings all the time. So you've just changed now the entire noise profile for particular parts of it, perhaps. You also have a bunch of newbies figuring out how to fly and landing over a school that's less than a mile from the airport.
Right, so this is what,
Or
to
right
me,
on the
it
road.
always gets back to, it's the noise, and the noise is related to the number of aircraft.
How busy it is?
There's an environmental impact that shifts in direct proportion to the number of flights. So that's an unmistakable fact.
Right.
Can we agree on that? Whether it's noise pollution or air pollution or whatever, all of the above. Why
Just the
do we
use of it.
helping you look just incredulous?
That's confused, more, sexist incredulous. The way in which you talk about it, and I recognize things are linked, but I try to look at things and boil it down to the negative impact of what the airport does to the town, and that should be our concern. There's pollution such as, oil in the water or that type of thing, but we have ordinances that cover that for everybody. If there's oil, and the airport actually does better than most other places because they test. So the unique aspect is noise and number of flights. And I tend to resist the going into really peripheral areas like hangars or flight schools or whatever. It's the bottom line is noise and flights.
I almost feel like we should talk to FAA or at least have this conversation of our concern
Right.
with someone who knows the law or knows the rules or regs to know whether or not, it just doesn't, it doesn't feel right to have a piece of property in town that we have no control over. I mean, there's zones and ordinances and, roads get posted and all that stuff. But I don't feel like there's anything that we can do about the airport.
Well, I don't see a path through at this point. That's not to say I don't think there should be, it's just I don't see a path.
Well, I think we should have a seat at the table if nothing else.
Well, so that seems to be, I'm sorry, let me try that sentence all over again. I think what tripped up the whole interlocal agreement concept, my understanding is that I can never remember the right contractual term that you guys use, the agreements.
Grant assurances.
Grant assurances, that's the word. My contracts never used the word grant assurances. And within the grant assurances, there is an assurance that essentially that says they'll keep, that they have the authority to make the decisions associated with the airport. And so when we came in and said, well, we want a different structure where we have a voice at the table, that violated that grant assurance.
No, I don't think that did. You can have seats at the table. That's all gonna be negotiated with the county, but it's not, there's nothing preventing a seat at the table.
I swear that was what the letter from the FAA about the interlocal.
Yeah, so how that was proposed was that there was a majority of Owl's Head citizens on it. The chair could only be an Owl's Head citizen. The build out of it wasn't something that the county would ever, that would have been seceding rights and powers, grant assurance number 5, all that jazz.
Okay,
So there's no wrong with a seat at the table, but you can't have all the seats at the table.
okay. That would have been a really good thing to come back with at that point and say, well, we can give you a seat, but what came back was no.
Well, it was a no starter. Yeah, we weren't, yes.
There was no negotiation.
Yeah.
There was no, we can't do what you asked, but we can do something. We can go this far, but no further. That didn't happen. It was no.
Yeah. Well, the county actually proposed, they'd say I don't say that.
Yes, I've noticed that the pronoun has shifted from we to they really
Yes.
quickly.
Oh, so quick. But no, there's nothing wrong. That wasn't the issue with that build-up. The county proposed a makeup to try to make it more people in play, more interest in play.
Okay.
But then it was perceived that there was a balance, a shift, a balance on a weighted balance on one side versus the other, and then it just came down to numbers, and that's where that whole thing fell apart.
Okay, so for my perception that the interlocal agreement wasn't worth pursuing came down to perhaps a misunderstanding at that level, that there was no way for us to get a voice at the table, and maybe a logical approach would be to go back to the interlocal agreement with not all the seats at the table, but a seat at the table.
Earlier, when you asked, should we pursue the interlocal and try to redraft that whole thing?
Yeah.
And I agree that absolutely made no sense, because anything that's protecting us enough to put in the agreement, the county's not going to agree to.
And
We had more
and I agree
power
with-
our own
yeah,
ordinance.
Right.
I still stand by that.
Okay.
10%.
And I agree with you at that point because I misunderstood what they were saying. I'm really just putting this out as here's an option.
Mhm.
So I'm fine going, trying to draft another ordinance, and I'm not saying, well, let's go back, an amendment 2 on all this. I'm not saying, the thing that was proposed to the town should be but I'm just letting you know, so the way, the wording is so important for all the reasons that you had mentioned before. One word can completely kill a thing and have you in court. So between 3 different attorneys, 1 aviation, 1 municipal, and then a federal somebody, that's how that was all those nuances were addressed. The language in that was
In what?
the amendment that was proposed to the town meeting. So I'm not saying we're gonna go that route, I'm just saying there are aspects of that that were completely vetted by attorneys to make sure that we weren't, going to end up in a legal mess.
I have a hard time understanding how that could be legal, and what I proposed, which was far less, would not be. Because what was proposed before would have prevented a runway extension.
Unless it was legally required by federal law, there were restrictions. So if the
It couldn't be an arbitrary extension, it couldn't be like,
we just feel like we want bigger or heavier or whatever aircraft to be able to enter, so therefore it's federally required. So the two different things.
I'm skeptical.
Fair.
Back to the original question.
Was there an original question?
Why
42.
Why are we writing an ordinance for the airport? Why?
My answer is to reduce noise.
I know what your answer is.
Sorry.
I know what your answer is. What's your answer?
That
the
was a great question.
reason that the airport would be put into a land use table would be to make it conforming.
Conforming to what?
It's identified. And that gets into conforming and non-conforming. So it's a battle that Warren fought very well.
I'm sorry.
I don't understand what you're saying. I really don't. I don't understand.
Because there are a lot of the restrictions that get brought up about the airport being a non-conforming use. So if it's identified in the land use table as a conforming property with approval process, then it no longer becomes the non-conforming property that it has been over the last.
Million years since it's been here.
But I don't think that answers the question. What is the town trying to achieve? Or at least it doesn't answer it for me.
Well, what do you want it to achieve?
Well, the town, so there's two towns. Part of the town wanted no, because that kept it as a non-conforming use. The other part of the town says we should be regulating this property as a conforming use, therefore we should have it planning board, or planning board no, whatever the variation is. So so the goal for any property, commercial or not, is to be a conforming use. Nobody wants to be a non-conforming use. So identifying a land use table would make it a conforming.
The difficulty for me in understand or supporting it being a conforming use, because I didn't understand what that meant to begin with. This is not my. Is that if you look at the space in which it sits, it's an entirely, mostly a rural residential community. It doesn't conform to what the rest of the environment is that it's sitting in. You've got, like I said, a school down less than a mile away from a runway. Like, if you look at the FAA's own language of like what conforming things look like in the areas abutting the airport, which is why other things went the way they did, the more that you can change those into commercial, the more compatible the airport is with the town. So my problem, what I had a large problem with, is that they're trying to make the town compatible with the airport. That's not how that's not how that should work. So that's why the ordinance amendment was done the way it was done. So the airport was here before we had an ordinance. So the thing that's a challenge is that, so when you're amending an ordinance, it's like, oh, you're retroactively hurting the airport. So the ordinance was done after the airport was built. Like, so how does that, how do you balance that? I don't really know. Attorneys that know more about that than I do helped us put that together, addressing the problem.
Other communities, what they do, so Owl's Head and the rest of the state are very different in how they approach these problems. other communities are very proactive that we are gonna protect the area around the airport. So if a school was at the end of the runway, that never would happen because there's a buffer zone around it. It's for noise issues, safety issues, stuff like that. That hasn't happened here. So like Trenton, they have I can't remember if it's an overlay zone or whatever it is, but development is limited in those areas. If you live there, it's something that's gonna be compatible with airport noise because you're gonna be exposed to it. So when the old Ash Point Community School got torn down to build a new one,
Outside Central.
yeah, then that may not have been able to be built there because the town was protecting, here, so it's a much different balance. Here, it's been built right up to the borders all the way around, and that's, more friction, where other communities are saying, no, you can't build here. Like Augusta's another one, if you look through their airport ordinances, it's, you cannot be within this area because you're gonna be exposed to noise. So it's just, Lauren's hit it spot on, like 15, 20 years ago, there was time to do this work and to prevent the growth in these areas. And, but that's, on the other side.
You're talking about preventing the growth that's encroaching on the airport.
Right, and that's
Not
why the
preventing-
difference is,
and
exactly.
She's talking about preventing the growth of the
That encroaches
airport.
on the town, right, yeah, so.
And honestly, when I've read the FAA discussions on this, it is worded, everything I read was worded in terms of what the local area needs to do to conform to the airport. That is the way the FAA words things.
I'm gonna send you part of their FAA site that you haven't seen. It's like
Fine.
totally not
Send me anything
jiving
you
at
want,
all.
I'll read it. But, I've gone online, I've read I was reading this stuff, this was several months ago, about, the community interaction, and everything I read was talking about making sure that the zoning around the airport conforms to the use of the airport. I wouldn't be the slightest bit surprised that some other part of their website talks
They
from a
want
different
the
perspective.
sponsor to do everything they can, not against laws, not against ordinances, but everything that they possibly can to ensure that they maintain compatibility with the town, or either direction you want to look at it, you can. But it's like, they can't just they can't break out, they can't just break town laws or ordinances because they have entered into a voluntary contract to get money. It's not how that works.
Right, I understand that. I've been saying that myself
Okay.
for the entire time I've been involved here. So, and I wasn't trying to talk about their regulations, I was trying to talk about the way they do the contracting, honestly. But,
Another suggestion, right? The county comes for planning board meetings and, there are things that aren't in the ordinances. But any activity that has a noise component to it should be required, maybe a study that would evaluate the current noise. I don't want to say put roadblocks, but the protections that the town wants, you build that into the permitting process, right? Because right now you come and it's a fairly simple process because there's not a lot of stuff in there. But if the protections that the town is looking for, you build them in there, the protections that Lauren's talking about are the ordinances, and there are steps in there. It becomes like overly cost, if it costs too much money, or there's an evaluation period there. And so.
Can you tell me under what circumstances would Part 150 be covered, paid for by the FAA? Aren't there some circumstances where they do?
It's the larger airports. Yeah, but studies for this size, even Ian's father talked about doing one. So.
So Earth threw out $150,000 to $200,000,
Gives it more.
which is, he said, it's the price of the master plan. I would imagine they would charge more than that for master plan, but then I thought I had read, so for bigger airports, they go from that.
Yeah.
Is there like an employment bill?
I don't think it's employment related. It's probably fleet mix and volume versus, because some military, like they carry only one person. or a few people versus commercial airliners. But usually airports with that type of aircraft probably have those studies funded.
One of the things that in the lawyer's comments in the memo that maybe it's a subtlety that misinterpreting. But I've been aware of restrictions on timings of flights and things like that, multiple other airports. I mean, Washington National Airport, I know there's a ton of restrictions on when those flights can occur. But the memo from the lawyer hinted at a lot of that is the owner of the airport deciding to do that. So the Washington Metro Airport Commission decides.
Some of these airports make a lot of money.
Yeah.
So they don't need grants. They do this all funded. They care less about a $1.1 million entitlement. They may not even use it. And that had been my goal for the initial solar project, which would generate more money than we need. We could have then not needed entitlement funds. And we would have broken that 20-year cycle of the grant assurances. So it's possible. But right now, the county, because of the size of the airport and the required service levels and the EAS and the maintain the runways and all that jazz, the 1.1 is what the county needs to do that. And to do that, they have to sign on every grant extends the grant assurances for those 20 years.
Okay. Well, the point I was getting at is I think that one of the reasons we have some difficulty and confusion here is that Owl's Head doesn't own the airport, the county owns the airport, and so the county isn't always operating in the way that we want them to operate. Okay. We're clearly not going to solve anything here today. I think we had a good conversation, but I'm going to suggest we bring it to a close so that we can get home to martinis and all that.
Whining children, I think you like to say.
No, I
No, we got that martini invite.
Can I ask, sorry, on that, so if you look at some of the flight plates, different, approaches for different runways, and you got like one place like Norwood, I don't remember where that is, I just saw it on your left. They have a displaced threshold, or you have to make your base to final turn at this distance, at this, versus here. And I don't think Norwood, again, I don't remember where it is, but it's a little, so they're not getting funding. A lot of them aren't getting funding, federal funds, so I'm trying to figure
They have
out.
no restrictions on operating hours or.
But there are actually restrictions. I'll bring them in. I've got a bunch of flight plates, and there's lots of them that have restrictions that aren't getting millions of dollars of.
but
Well, most airports like even Augusta only gets 69,000 a year or something like that.
So I guess my question is, I don't know if there's a direct report, if it's directly relative to what their funding is to what their restrictions are. As far as noise abatement.
I didn't follow that link either. The link I was trying to say is that, okay, if the city of Augusta owns the Augusta airport and the Augusta airport is within city limits, then the city can say, we want our airport to limit these, and so you end up with restrictions. The county owns the airport in Owl's Head, and so we've lost that linkage between the ownership of the airport and the community itself. And I think that's what I hadn't understood before as to why places like Washington National could have limits, but we can't.
Because they don't use federal funds.
Because they don't use.
I cannot believe that Washington
There's so much
National
money.
You're making a link that I can't follow.
Because if they receive.
I'm saying the ownership is.
Irrelevant.
Huh?
Irrelevant. If the ownership doesn't take financial assistance from the federal government, they do whatever they want with the airport. That's your link.
Does that make sense to you?
No.
So if the county didn't have grant assurances, the county would be happily say, we are closed at 10 PM and we'll open at 6.
This was, I don't remember the exact words, but it was addressed
That's a grant assurance, so it's in there.
in this.
Oh, Ben's, oh, sure.
Okay, I didn't want to keep this going.
Yeah.
Let me look that up and I'll try to answer that. So now I understand the connection you were making. I did not make that connection. I think what I read was totally a matter of the owner of the airport can decide to shut it down for some time. You're saying they don't have that option if they are taking grants. Okay.
Which you voluntarily entered into.
Right. Right.
That's just-
I'm well, yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. I get that.
I know that you know.
Okay.
It's fun.
So it's always fun to spin things up one more time. Well, it's him.
No, I'm just trying to keep the facts.
Okay, the only unfinished business we haven't talked about is request for information from the airport manager. You're no longer the airport manager. I haven't talked to Jeff yet. I will bring that up with Jeff shortly, hopefully before the next meeting.
Are you gonna try and get him to say what actually happened?
Yes, I am.
Turn
I,
on your phone so that you record it.
How about what?
the number of flights.
The
I'm
numbers.
sorry, Jeremy, the answer you gave me last week is.
That's all I had, that's all I got.
Yeah, I don't know, we probably liked the FAA. That is not enough of an answer.
Yeah, no,
for
I
me.
don't have the answer, I told you that.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I know.
It's not how I did it.
So TBD.
Okay, any new business?
Nope.
Any other business?
Nope.
Any comments from the floor?
And
Okay, next meeting, May 16th, 2024. Very good? Very good.
very good.
We stand adjourned.
Good going, Dave.
All right, sorry for being tardy.
You'll be Dr. Tay. Can you get the machine there?